Not too long ago, we looked at some hidden gems for the Nintendo Game Boy and uncovered some handheld delights that were sure to keep anyone's thumbs busy. However, once you're finished playing through the likes of Revenge of the Gator and Mole Mania, you might be getting a bit tired of the monochrome. Luckily, Nintendo have you covered with the appropriately named Game Boy Color. Originally released in 1998, the Game Boy Color added a much-needed splash of chromaticity to proceedings, and became home to a whole host of games that took advantage of the new handheld's colourful capabilities. With franchises like Pokemon, The Legend of Zelda, Kirby and Donkey Kong all receiving stellar Game Boy Color entries, Nintendo fans weren't short of great titles with which they could pass the time. We're after hidden gems again though, and you know what that means. Not a Pikachu, Link, Kirby or DK in sight. So come with us as we uncover the vibrant underbelly of the Game Boy Color's back catalogue and dig up some bright pixelated gems for your expert appraisal. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 hidden gems for the Game Boy Color. Number 10. Metal Walker. At the time of its release, Metal Walker got a lot of stick for being too similar to the Pokemon series. Players would explore the world from a familiar top-down view, recruit cutesy underlings to their team, and then use them to do battle throughout the lengthy story. We think the Pokemon comparisons are a little unfair though, and whilst there are definitely similarities, the battle system in Metal Walker is intriguingly unique. Only one Metal Walker can be active at any time, and when battle commences, your steel-plated sidekick is thrown into a walled arena. The robots can be sent in certain directions, and players can choose how much momentum to give the little metal fellows as they move. They will bounce off of the arena walls pinball style and do damage when they crash into enemies. The player can further affect proceedings by placing items onto the battlefield. If you manage to place a beneficial item in your robot's trajectory, you can augment its stats or give it a HP boost. And it's also possible to place damaging items in the path of enemies too. See? Absolutely nothing like Pokemon. Pokemon aren't even metal. Well, apart from Steelix and Registeel and Metagross, Honedge, Skarmory. Okay, a lot of them are metal, but my point still stands. Number 9. Dexter's Laboratory, Robot Rampage. We've seen adaptations of popular kids shows pop up on these lists before, but always in the form of a surprisingly well-crafted and fun platformer. With Dexter's Laboratory Robot Rampage, however, the developers decided to take inspiration from a series that appeared very early on in our TripleJump Hidden Gems journey, Elevator Action. Putting players in the role of an agent tasked with clearing out a high-rise full of bad guys, the Elevator Action games provided an addictive mix of run-and-gun action and strategic positional gameplay. And Dexter's Laboratory Robot Rampage is essentially a reskin, with the violence toned down and the cartoon japery toned up. We don't mean reskin in a derogatory sense either. Developers Altron were also responsible for the Japan and EU-only Game Boy Color version of Elevator Action, known as Elevator Action EX, and redesigned the graphics when it came to the North America only Dexter's Laboratory Robot Rampage. The results are a high-quality arcade action title featuring everyone's favourite boy genius using his network of elevators to round up rampaging robots. So, in a way I suppose, this is a stealth 2-in-1 entry. Love it when that happens. It always gives me a lift. Number 8. Towers, Lord Banniff's Deceit. Towers, Lord Banniff's Deceit is a first-person dungeon crawler RPG that was originally developed for the Atari ST in 1993 and made a very surprising leap to Nintendo's handheld 7 years later. It's probably the list's most controversial entry, as review scores at the time were very mixed, but fans of this first-person handheld adventure have since heralded the game's taxing puzzles, cool fantasy atmosphere, and deep gameplay. The plot concerns a group of adventurers who need their boat repaired after a storm, and the mayor of a town they find themselves in agrees to have the vessel fixed if they go and find out what's happening to Lord Banniff. After entering the Lord's fortified abode, the deceitful one causes a collapse and traps them within, and the quest to find out what Banniff's deal is and escape his castle is underway. It's not the most gripping storyline, and the game won't appeal to everyone, but if you're the sort that enjoys searching huge dungeons and doing battle with various goblins and goblin-adjacent creatures, you should lap this up. And it looks absolutely gorgeous on a Game Boy Color screen. Just don't trust anything that Lord Banniff says though. Deceitful, that one. Total liar. Number 7. Survival Kids. Providing what is essentially a take on The Lord of the Flies, but given a cutesy anime treatment, the next game on our list would eventually evolve into the Lost in Blue series. In Survival Kids, or Stranded Kids in Europe, players take on the role of a boy or girl who've been stranded on a desert island. While keeping their chosen survival kid alive by tending to hunger, thirst, and fatigue meters, players will be exploring the island, going hunting and fishing, finding places to rest, and making use of an extensive item crafting system. The gameplay is open-ended, meaning that players can make choices throughout the course of the story that will see them progress in different ways, and multiple endings can be attained depending on whether certain criteria are met. These can range from your chosen youth floating out to sea on a raft never to be seen again, to escaping with their fellow castaway and heading home, and eventually tying the knot in a 10 years later epilogue. There's even an ending where they can happily live out their days on the deserted island, and honestly that prospect sounds pretty attractive. Oh, but I just remember the tropical spiders and snakes and things. I think actually I'll be waiting on the boat. Thank you very much. Number 6. Wendy Every Which Way. Onesie-clad broomstick jockey Wendy the Good Little Witch is an unlikely source for a platform game hero, seeing as she's a fairly obscure side character from the Casper the Friendly Ghost canon. It's even more surprising that her one and only dip into the video gaming world turned out to be an original and well-crafted adventure featuring some top-notch visuals and animation. Wendy Every Which Way was developed by Shantae creators Way Forward, and the story kicks off when the titular occult youth removes some magical stones from a chest in her aunt's attic, causing a nearby floating castle to crash into her house. That'll teach Wendy to not mess around with stuff that belongs to supernatural relatives. Wendy's mission to restore gravity sees her searching the halls, dungeons, gardens, and towers of the castle on a quest to retrieve scattered stones and return things to normal. And the game consists mostly of platforming with the occasional bout of broom-mounted side-scrolling shooting action to break things up. Throughout the adventure, Wendy can invert gravity at will, using this power to solve puzzles and foil enemies. And it's this gravity warping gameplay that made Wendy Every Which Way stand out from the platforming crowd. It's certainly the best game the Casper franchise ever produced, anyway. Number 5. Hexite, The Shapes of Victory. Despite its somewhat bombastic subtitle, Hexite The Shapes of Victory is one of those games that doesn't look like much initially, but provides an addictive experience if given the chance. This multiplayer puzzle game presents players with an arrangement of hexagons, and tasks them with using the shapes at their disposal to fill the hexagons in such a way that they capture as many of the small triangles inside as possible. A simple idea that throws up lots of tricky situations. The puzzler showed up early in the Game Boy Color's lifetime, being a launch title for the console in Japan, but still never managed to get a foot in the door of gaming relevance. Honestly, it's not hard to see why it didn't capture the imagination of the gaming public. With its lackluster visuals and simple premise, which could be played with some coloured pens and piece of triangular grid printed paper, but that requires effort and isn't accompanied by jaunty chiptunes. Hexite The Shapes of Victory is an original and addictive puzzle game that was overlooked, and puzzle fans are sure to get many evenings of brain-bending enjoyment out of it. Just push aside the fact that it looks like junior school maths homework and you'll be fine. Number 4. Toki Tori. Games that come out towards the end of a console's life cycle are often destined to slide into obscurity. By the time adorable platformer Toki Tori was released in September of 2001, the Game Boy Advance was sweeping the market with the next generation of handheld gaming. In the case of Toki Tori, this meant that handheld gamers who had already made the generational jump would inadvertently miss out on one of the Game Boy Color's cutest and most enjoyable platformers. One of the most graphically impressive titles on the console, Toki Tori was created by Dutch developers Two Tribes, and told the story of a newly hatched chick who heads off on a journey to rescue his unhatched brothers and sisters. Despite literally hatching at the start of the game, this newborn hero possesses the wits to solve puzzles, gather eggs, and avoid enemies through a variety of tricky locations by using mystical powers like teleportation and bridge building. Providing a mentally stimulating platform adventure with lots of items and power-ups to use, Toki Tori is a fine example of a hidden gem for the Game Boy Color that fully fledged puzzle platformer veterans and newly hatched novices alike can enjoy. Number 3. Magical Chase. Always good for a hidden gem or two, the subgenre of shoot-em-ups, known colloquially as cute-em-ups, takes players out of the cockpits of heavily armed attack choppers and advanced space fighters and puts them in control of adorable sentient vessels or junior witches in frilly dresses. Japan-only side-scrolling shooter Magical Chase opts for the latter approach, and provides a surprisingly fun experience that's a bit more laid back than its genre stablemates. Originally released on the TurboGrafx 16, this side-scroller appeared on the Game Boy Color in 2000, and provided a compelling shooter experience with a gentle difficulty curve. The game stars a witch named Ripple, who, like Wendy from a few entries earlier, gets herself into trouble by sticking her little witchy nose somewhere it didn't belong. I guess a prerequisite for being a junior witch is possessing the kind of curiosity that can lead to disaster. Tasked with retrieving 6 demons before she's turned into a frog, Ripple must negotiate 6 weird and wonderful levels, blasting cutesy enemies with destructive spells, and collecting gems that can be used to purchase power-ups, extra lives, and health boosts. If you like the idea of shoot-em-ups, but don't like the idea of being assailed by hails of fast-moving bullets from all sides from the get-go, then Magical Chase might well be worth a shot. Number 2, Project S11. If, however, you'd rather your shoot-em-ups strapped you into a one-off experimental fighter capable of annihilating whole fleets of hostile aliens, then don't worry, we've got you covered there too. This obscure shooter, known as Project S11, is played from a top-down perspective with vertically scrolling levels. Put in the pilot seat of the titular top-secret fighter ship, the player is let loose in various graphically impressive locales to shoot down swarms of alien vessels, with a difficulty level that's a couple of steps up from Magical Chase. Despite getting a strong showing in the review stakes, thanks to impressive graphics, compelling gameplay, and a total lack of slowdown, which could often affect shooters of the era, Project S11 almost immediately fell into obscurity, and we can't help but think that its lackluster title played a part in its downfall. The game was intended to be named by us, the gaming public, with publisher Sunsoft offering up a $200 prize for the punter who came up with the best title. The only rule was that it had to start with the word project, but from what we can tell, no winner was chosen and the developers stuck with the S11 placeholder. If only we'd be paying attention in the year 2000, Project Walrus could have been a world beater. And number 1, Warlocked. Back in the late 90s, real-time strategy fans were enjoying the likes of StarCraft and Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun, and neither of those games got a Game Boy Color port. I mean, why would they? An RTS on the Game Boy Color? The very idea is preposterous. Well, veteran British developer Bit Studios said phooey to such defeatism and decided to bring an RTS game to the Game Boy Color anyway. This bold move resulted in Warlocked, a handheld fantasy strategy game that was compared favourably to Warcraft 2. Offering players 2 opposing campaigns, Warlocked tasked players with commanding units like archers and wizards as they explore battlefields and engage foes, while worker units tend to the base and gather resources. The action is controlled using a cursor, and players have access to special skills and spells like the Toxic Wizard's noxious gas attacks. Despite RTS being a genre that is notoriously difficult to get working on consoles, this early handheld attempt was highly rated by all who played it, and provided an experience that both genre veterans and total newcomers could enjoy. Alas, the game failed to make sales headway, and fell into obscurity, prematurely killing off a Game Boy Advance sequel that was being worked on. Strangely, this sequel was set to be called Wizards, not Wizarded. I mean, come on guys, stick to your own naming conventions at least.